Yoshita Singh with Press Trust of India. Thank you, Mr. President. Prime Minister, the US is giving a lot of push to curb illegal immigration, and India has been cooperating on this issue. How does India see this issue in the larger context? Thank you.
I don't think this is a question that is about India only, but even globally you can talk about this issue. And we are of the opinion that anybody who enters another country illegally, they have absolutely no right to be in that country. And as far as India and the US is concerned, we have always been of the same opinion, and that is that any verified Indian who is in the US illegally, we are fully prepared to take them back to India. However, it doesn't stop there. These are children of very ordinary families, and they are lured by big dreams and big promises. A lot of them are brought in without them knowing about why they're going to a country. And in fact, they are connected with a human trafficking system, and we have to make sure that we fight against this system. As far as the US and India is concerned, I think what we should do is make efforts to make sure that we uproot these from within the system so that we can reduce or remove human trafficking. And basically the young, vulnerable, poor people of India are fooled into coming over as illegal immigrants. And our bigger fight actually is against this ecosystem or this system that encourages such gangs to thrive. And I can tell you that India will completely support your endeavor in achieving this.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. The question for Prime Minister Modi first, if I may. I wanted to ask you, did you discuss any possible business deals with Elon Musk during your meetings today, Mr. Prime Minister? And Mr. President, I wanted to ask you, today you spoke about hoping to have three-way talks with President Xi and President Putin. What would you say to European leaders and other allies who may be concerned that you're apparently more keen to speak to America's adversaries than to its allies? Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll just go first on this one. We had some talks, and we told the European Union, we told the NATO people, largely they overlap, you have to pay more money because it's unfair what we're doing. We're doing a tremendous amount more. We're probably $200 billion more going into Ukraine, using for Ukraine to fight. And Europe has not really carried its weight in terms of the money. It's not equitable. And we want to see a counterbalance. We want to have them put up more money. They have to do that. At the same time, we had a very good conversation with President Putin yesterday, and we also had a very good conversation. I did in both cases with President Zelensky, and I think we're going to be able to do something. I think we're going to be able to make a deal, and I hope so, because it's a horrible war. It's a very terrible, bloody war with 1.5 million soldiers at least already dead on the battlefield, lying all over the fields like nobody's ever seen anything like it certainly since the Second World War. And so I think we're going to be able to do something. We're working with President Zelensky and with President Putin, and my impression is that I know that President Zelensky wants to make a deal, and I also feel that I know that President Putin wants to make a deal. I wanted to know that before I began any detailed discussions, but the meeting and the conversation, also the meeting with Steve Witkoff in Moscow, was a very successful one. And my phone call with him was a very successful one. Please.
You asked a question regarding Elon Musk. I have known him for a very long time. I was not even a prime minister at the time when I first met him. I was chief minister. And today he came to meet me along with all his family, with his children. And so we had a nice discussion. As far as the EV is concerned, EVs are concerned, the word EV has a copyright, and that is one person who has a copyright for the word EV, and that is Trump.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask whether you discussed at all today the case of Gautam Adani, who's one of the wealthiest men in Asia and perceived as an ally of Prime Minister Modi? Prime Minister Modi, have you asked the President to take action on that case? Thank you.
Firstly, India is a democratic country, and our culture and our thought philosophy is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which basically means that the entire world is a family. Every Indian is my own family member. And when it comes to such personal matters, leaders of two countries will not get together on that topic and discuss anything on an individual matter.
Go ahead, please. Yeah, please. Sir, go ahead, please.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I have a question for you as well. But, Mr. President, you have suggested, with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war, you've suggested several things that Ukraine should give up. The idea of NATO membership, territory that was seized back in 2014 by Russia. What should Russia give up?
Russia has gotten themselves into something that I think they wish they didn't. If I were president, it would not have happened. Absolutely would not have happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. If you look at what has taken place under President Bush, they lost a lot. Under President Obama, they lost Crimea. Under Biden, it looks like they could lose the whole thing. Under Trump, they lost nothing. Ukraine lost nothing. They didn't give up anything. And you take a look at the other three presidents surrounding me, they gave up a lot. I think that when you look at Ukraine and when you look at the mess that they're in, it's got to be ended and it's got to be stopped. Now, Russia's taken over a pretty big chunk of territory, and they also have said from day one, long before President Putin, they've said they cannot have Ukraine be in NATO. They said that very strongly. I actually think that that was the thing that caused the start of the war. And Biden said it, and Zelensky said it, and I think that was one of the reasons, one of the starts of the war. But from long before Putin, they said you cannot have Ukraine going in any way into NATO. And I start from that standpoint. I think everybody knew that. Now, if a better deal can be negotiated, if they are able to make a deal where they can do that, that's fine with me. I really don't care. I want that bloodshed to stop. I don't want to see, we have an ocean between us and the site we're talking about, the site of death. We're calling it the fields of death. We have a big ocean in between us. This is more important for Europe. We shouldn't be in. They have to equalize, and they're going to have to do it fast, but they have to equalize. But as far as the negotiation, it's too early to say what's going to happen. Maybe Russia will give up a lot. Maybe they won't. And it's all dependent on what is going to happen. The negotiation really hasn't started. But I will say, as far as NATO is concerned, from many years before President Putin, I will tell you that I've heard that Russia would never accept that. And I think Ukraine knew that because Ukraine wasn't in and never requested to be in until more recently. So that's the way it is. And I think that's the way it's going to have to be. Go ahead, please. All right, go ahead, please, with the tie. With the tie, yeah.
Mr. President.
Yes, go ahead, please.
This is Saurabh Shukla from News Mobile. Mr. President, you spoke about Prime Minister Modi as a tough negotiator. Who was a tougher negotiator today and who has a better negotiating tactic when it comes to tariffs.
Oh, he's a
and
much
trade.
tougher negotiator than me, and he's a much better negotiator than me. There's not even a contest. Okay? Yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Reena Bhardwaj from ANI. How do you see this relationship between India and the United States to counter China? And what is your vision when it comes to India, brokering peace in the Ukraine and Russia conflict?
Well, I think we're going to have a very good relationship with China. I got along with President Xi very well until COVID. That was a bridge too far. But until then, I got along with President Xi very, very well. We were very close as leaders go. I don't want to be naive, but as leaders go, I think we were very close. And I think that China is a very important player in the world. I think they can help us get this war over with Ukraine and Russia. And I look at India, I do see the skirmishes on the border, which are quite vicious, and I guess they continue to go on. If I could be of help, I'd love to help, because that should be stopped. That's been going on for a long time, and it's quite violent. It's quite violent, but I would hope that China and India and Russia and U.S. and all of us can get along. It's very important. The power of weaponry today is, and not only nuclear, but nuclear in particular, the power of weaponry is very important. I said before that I had very constructive talks in my first term with President Putin about the denuclearization of the two countries, and then we were going to go to China after we worked some kind of a deal. And we, at the confines of a deal, I thought he really wanted to do it, so did I, denuclearize. And it's such a beautiful term when you think about it. In other words, to bring it down, because the power of those weapons is too great. And I did speak to President Xi about that, and I was getting also a very good response. He's building a very strong nuclear power. He's not very close to Russia or the United States right now, but he will be soon. I mean, he'll catch up over the period of 4 or 5 years, they say. But it would be a great thing if we could, on a military basis. We're going to spend this year $915 billion on military. Russia, without the war, was spending close to 100, but with the war, I can't tell you what they're spending, but they're spending a lot. And China is spending $400 and $450 billion. We're over $900 billion. And I said, it doesn't really make sense, does it? We're spending the money against each other, and we could spend that money for better purpose if we got along. And I'll tell you, I think that something like that will happen. First, when I left, as you know, 4 years ago, we didn't have Israel and the Middle East. We didn't have October 7th, a disaster, the disaster. Nothing was happening. Iran was not going to do anything, because Iran did not have much money at that point. They were broke. They were totally broke. They didn't have money for Hamas or for Hezbollah. And you didn't have Russia with Ukraine, and that would never have happened. But now I come back, and the whole world is on fire, so I have to put out the fires. But after I put out the fires, I'm going to meet with China, and I'm going to meet with Russia, and we're going to see if we can de-escalate, if we can bring it down military, especially as it pertains to nuclear. Please.
Mike, please. Prime Minister, how do you see India's role? You have had discussions with President Trump about de-escalating the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. As you know, I have been in constant contact with both Russia and Ukraine. I have also visited both countries. And many people are mistaken, and they feel that India is neutral. I would like to clarify, India is not neutral. We have taken a side, and we have taken the side of peace. And it is based on this principle of ours that in the presence of President Putin, I clearly said in front of the media that this is not the era of war. And even today, it is my conviction that solutions cannot be found on the battlefield. Ultimately, you have to come to the negotiating table. And India has constantly made efforts that there are talks that take place where both parties are present. It is only then that we will find a solution. The efforts being made by President Trump, I support them, I welcome them, and I would like that President Trump is successful as soon as possible so that the world is on the path to peace once again.
Everybody, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I very much appreciate the Prime Minister visiting our great country, and I do really appreciate it. We have so much in common, and all we want to do is have peace, and we want to have strength, and we want to have lots of different things together. But the relationship with India and with the Prime Minister has never been better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was US President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Some pretty big announcements there. If I could just give a recap for our viewers. President Donald Trump led by saying that there's a special bond between the United States and India, the world's oldest and largest democracies in the world. There were frameworks announced to strengthen ties further, also announced the extradition of the Havarana, whom President Donald Trump said that the extradition has been approved with regards to the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attacks. They are also going to be starting negotiations on the trade gap. The US president also said that the United States will sell F-35 fighter jets to India, which would join the elite club of countries with the state-of-the-art stealth planes. They've also reached important agreements on energy that will ensure that the United States be the leading supplier of oil and natural gas to India, hopefully the #1 supplier. Now, for more on this, we also have with us our Voice of America correspondent, Jessica Stone. Jessica, thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, some big announcements have been made here when it comes to trade, when it comes to being the supplier of oil and natural gas. What were some of the big takeaways from this, Jessica?
So I think that the big takeaway on trade is that there will be some sort of formal announcement within the year about a trade deal between the U.S. and India. I'm just pulling up my notes here. And you mentioned the remarks that President Trump made about in order to ensure India's energy security, we will focus on trade in oil and gas. So that will certainly be part of it. But the other main thing I want to draw your attention to is his remarks on the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor and Israel. He drew attention once again to the partnership between the U.S. and India in that respect. And given his remarks there at the end of the press conference about all we want is peace, coming after Prime Minister Modi essentially said the same thing. It's really an uplifting ending to this press conference, and very, very warm indeed between these two leaders. Not necessarily something I expected, given the conversations around tariffs and around the sort of muscular rhetoric we had coming out of the White House in advance of this visit, but it really ended on a high note, I believe.
Right, let's also talk about the Quad. That was something that was mentioned by the Indian Prime Minister as well. He mentioned how India and America's partnership strengthens democracy and democratic values, and we'll work together to maintain peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. We, of course, also know that the U.S. President will be visiting India for the Quad summit as well. So what sort of cooperation can we expect there?
Well, we've already seen a deepening of the strategic cooperation between the Quad countries when it comes to these Coast Guard patrols that are happening, the Malabar exercises, and I wonder if we won't see an announcement at the Quad about a deeper defense type arrangement between these four countries, and I think that that's something we'll have to watch for as we move forward into that Quad summit. It certainly bears noting that the Trump administration officials have been saying that they are closer with India than the other Quad countries in that formulation, and that they really see India as a key hedge against China and against really not just China, but the forces that would be anti-free in the world. So I don't know exactly what that means. We'll have to see how they interpret that. But it's safe to say that the Quad is very important, that Trump's essentially taking a victory lap for reinvigorating it during his first administration, and seems to be happy that Biden also kept it up.
Right, and absolutely, Susan and I, we were also earlier discussing people-to-people ties. We know that India has been cooperating when it comes to the issue of illegal Indian immigrants. We heard Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statements on that as well. But when it comes to people-to-people ties, how do you think the two sides can strengthen that going forward?
Well, we already see a lot of Indian Americans involved in some of these policy conversations around trade and around the IMEC, and I think we're going to see more involvement. I certainly see more involvement of Indian Americans in politics on both sides of the aisle, but in particular more of them now on the right side of the aisle, and even in this administration. So there seems to be an activation and energy within the diaspora here in the United States, and that may be aided really through these people-to-people ties, drawing the connection between the motherland, as Prime Minister Modi might say, and the diaspora around the world.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for the latest on this. Just for our viewers, let's also go over the comments made by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When talking about the US trade agreement, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that Washington and New Delhi are pushing to conclude a mutually beneficial trade agreement. In order to ensure India's energy security, we will focus on trade in oil and gas, investment in energy infrastructure, and we will also increase cooperation in the area of nuclear energy. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us from New York. Susan, what were your key takeaways from this press briefing?
So many announcements we heard. I mean, I know the headline tomorrow, what it's going to be, and it's going to be Prime Minister Modi drawing inspiration from MAGA here, calling for MEGA, and then when the two countries come together, creating MEGA. That was really, I think, the nugget, the golden nugget of this press conference, and I saw that President Trump really liked that as well. It was interesting that they're announced that an energy agreement is going to be reached. And you and I, we've been all night, your time, we've been talking about this people-to-people dialogue and how important it is. I thought it was interesting that Prime Minister Modi alluded to that and said that the Indian community in the U.S. is very important. There are going to be more consulates in L.A. and Boston, and also American universities, their offshore campuses. There's talks for them to come to India. As you mentioned, AI, artificial intelligence, a trade route that President Trump talked about that's going to be very important. The United States is going to be working with India, Israel, all the way to Italy, where there's going to be this undersea cable that's going to be very interesting for trade. I thought it was very interesting that the two leaders really talked about trade and tariffs in a matter-of-fact way. When President Trump talked about tariffs, he also said that we're going to be making a lot of great trade agreements with India, and then announced that energy agreement and said that they're going to be talking about more agreements coming before the end of the year. They're going to double their bilateral trade by 2030 to $500 billion. And of course, the sale of F-35 jets, that defense contract that we were anticipating, that happened as well.
Right. Well, absolutely, Susan. I mean, especially the MAGA, MEGA, that becoming mega, that is going to be, that analogy is definitely going to be the highlight. But Susan, thank you so much for tracking this with us. Of course, that's all for now. We'll continue to track all the developments on that front. Of course, let me just bring our viewers up to speed with all the big announcements that were made during the press briefing. U.S. President Donald Trump said that I'm pleased to announce that my administration has approved the extradition of one of the plotters and one of the very evil people of the world having to do with the horrific 2008 Mumbai terrorist attacks. to face justice in India. He's going back to India to face justice. Of course, the United States and India are also to start negotiations on the trade gap and how they can close that. US President Donald Trump also said that the United States will sell F-35 fighter jets to India, which could join the elite club of countries with state-of-the-art stealth planes. Some of the big announcements that were made during the briefing. For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.